Welcome to the Agency Uplift podcast, where we go past the highlight reel and dig into what actually builds a strong digital agency. That's clear foundations, better decisions, and the courage to scale on purpose. I'm your host, Sean Lang, co-founder of Social Commerce Club and advisor to agency owners just like you. And today is going to be another solo episode. Now, a lot of agency owners come to me and they say things like, my operations are so messy, or I need better processes. Those are probably both true things. And you might think that that is the root issue or that is the problem. That's not even the lagging indicator of the issue. That's kind of right in the middle of your problem. So first off, let's look at what messy ops actually results in. Messy operations at the end of the day results in clients leaving. If your operations are messy, it means that people aren't doing what they're supposed to do, or they're not communicating the way they're supposed to be communicating, or they're not producing the level of quality that they're supposed to be producing. And at the end of the day, clients will end up leaving because of that. So the actual lagging indicator of you having messy operations is churn. Now, churn is not actually going to be caused by one specific thing. It's actually a breakdown of the entire, I call it the hierarchy of frameworks that you need to have installed in your agency. So let's start with client churn and let's work our way back. So first off, client churn isn't a retention tactic problem. There's not one specific tactic that is going to solve this. Churn is actually It's the scoreboard for your client service delivery and your client experience. So churn can result from things all the way from the very beginning to before the client signed the contract. Churn can be a result of incorrect first impressions or bad first impressions, incorrect expectations during the sales process, what sort of the communication cadence was like, what leadership presence was like within the sales process and in onboarding, etc. So in order to solve client churn, we actually need to work backwards. So now let's look at the next thing in the chain, which is inconsistent service delivery. If we want to make inconsistent service delivery consistent, if we want to solve service delivery issues, the big thing that generally most agencies don't have in place is a definition of done, which is objective and across everything. So your symptom here is going to be that done actually means different things to different people. And the solve for this is for you to objectively define what good looks like for every step of your end-to-end service delivery process. Be very clear on what your deliverables are, what your milestones are to get to those deliverables, who are the people involved in that, what their roles are, how are we actually, managing quality. And is there at least one leader or one person involved in this that knows exactly what good looks like so that they can be involved in every step of the process? At the end of the day, delivering a quality service relies on a system, not just a single person, not just you as the founder. Okay, but in order to actually do that with service, we now need to look at messy operations. Okay, if your operations are messy, it's really, really hard to make your service delivery consistent. Now, your operations are going to be messy because of a number of things. A really, really common one in the agency space is siloed knowledge. You have people working in silos. You have specific people who know specific things and they get called in for specific points of whatever they do. You need to actually have your knowledge wide open for everyone to be able to understand and to incorporate into what they do. If you, like most agency owners, keep everyone's knowledge on kind of a need-to-know basis, then you're making every single person a single point of failure. What if that person doesn't come into work that week? What if that person is sick? What if that person just is having an off day, right? You need everybody to actually understand what the standard is and how to get there as well. Another symptom of this is going to be ad hoc execution, which is basically, again, execution quality is going to vary person by person by person. And then another thing is very commonly is we will solve problems with automation, but it's kind of like duct tape together because again, operations are messy. So we have a little piece of tape here, one little piece of automation which solved a problem when we implemented it. But then as you start to add more people to the system, again, the benefit of that gets lost. So the fix here is yes, you do need processes and SOPs, and these need to actually be built by the people who are doing the work so that everybody has objective knowledge and understanding on the step-by-step process for each task within that end-to-end process. These need to reflect what your core values are, which is kind of a hint of a few more steps that we're going to be getting down to. They need to be version controlled. And by version controlled, I mean, we need to make sure that people are using the most up-to-date version. If there is an update, let's make sure that people only have access to the update. And then it's really, really powerful to visualize what your SOPs, what your process looks like end to end before you add automation, because then this allows you to really, really intuitively understand how it all fits together in your team as well. But we can't do any of this. We can't fix our operations. We can't, fix that siloed knowledge and ad hoc execution and, duct taped automation if we don't have accountability. And so now this leads to people. Okay. So people in this case, when this is happening, people generally own tasks, but they don't actually own the outcome. And so they're really, again, just focused on their one thing. We need people to actually focus on the outcome. We don't sell our clients a list of tasks. We sell them outcomes. And so your people actually need to own outcomes as well. And then another piece to this is that the feedback that you give your people is sporadic. The fix to this, again, you've heard me, if you listen to this podcast at all, you've heard me talk a lot about the importance of role scorecards. And spoiler, this is a lot of what we focus on with my coaching clients, really just building this culture of accountability. So the fix here is implementing role scorecards for every single role. What, defining what in one sentence, what the mission is of this role, what the outcomes are. So how are we measuring how are we measuring whether they are being effective or not, and what behaviors we need to see in order to know that they are being successful as well. And then bake in a weekly feedback cadence. They need to be getting feedback regularly, and also they need to be giving you feedback regularly as well so that you understand what's going on. Accountability is impossible without explicit outcomes and ongoing coaching. And this is where a lot of agencies absolutely fall flat. They think that they can hire around accountability, but the idea is if you hire people, you actually need to bake in more accountability. You need to systematize that accountability. But guess what? We can't actually systematize accountability if we don't have clarity, which is our next loop in the chain here. And the way for you to know that you don't have clarity is if you just have ambiguous goals. If your team has ambiguous goals, if your agency has ambiguous goals, and you don't have defined ownership. If you can't point to anything in the process and say, this is owned by so-and-so, and also here is the standard, you don't have clarity. And then the next step beyond that is if you can't point to me where you are tracking this, where we are validating that this is being successful, you don't have clarity. So the fix here is just be ruthlessly clear. And again, this is right in line with my core value, ruthless clarity in client communications. Make sure that we are the leader, not the client. We need to have internal definitions of success, and we need to have visual roadmaps for everything that we do, especially client onboarding. That's a really, really big piece to, again, if we're starting with churn, churn comes all the way back to those very first impressions and expectations, and that starts with visual roadmaps. But of course, clarity doesn't really matter if we don't have systems to manage people and to know that we have the right people in seats in general. So the symptom here is that your new hires are going to seem good. Everyone always seems good, which is why you hired them. You always have that sort of voice speaking in your ear saying, I don't really know if this is the right person. I sure hope they are. So the symptom is new hires seem good, but then in, the first couple of weeks or maybe first couple of months, they just feel like they under-deliver. And any contractors that you have, you just end up throwing them out in the cold and say, hey, just get to it. Just get me the stuff. Which, sidebar here, contractors or employees, at the end of the day, you should think of them the same. No matter how you legally are committed to them on paper, how you pay them, where they are in the world, at the end of the day, they are contributors to your business, and you are leaving so much on the table if you just treat contractors as this sort of transient resource that you can kind of extract value from. No, they're people just like employees, so don't throw them out in the cold. So, no people systems. The fix here is we need to create really strong onboarding. We need to onboard people. Again, doesn't matter if they're a contractor or an employee. And this makes sure that we have a consistent experience and we're holding people consistently accountable from the moment we hire them to when we start managing them. And this comes back to, again, that scorecard, which needs to incorporate your values, needs to incorporate what culture looks like at the agency, communication norms. And then after that, once we have the scorecard, once we have that culture piece, then we give them the playbook. Then we train them by those SOPs. And we do this for employees and for contractors. And one really, really big thing that a lot of agencies miss is when we're onboarding people, we need to know what day 1 through day 7, like the first week in writing, what does it look like? How do you measure when somebody is onboarded? How do you measure whether they get it or not? A lot of us just start handing them client accounts or handing them deliverables and say, all right, let's see how this goes. And while you can't fully get away from that, you definitely want to mitigate against that as much as possible, because this is your agency and you want to give your clients the best experience possible. But people systems are kind of impossible to make if we don't have a strong culture and we don't have defined core values, right? Without explicit, defined, and enforced core values, your agency is just going to mutate. Everything downstream is going to shift. Basically, everything is going to be reactive because we don't have that solid bedrock of values guiding everything that we do, guiding our quality, guiding our client fit, guiding our team alignment. And these values, they have to be observable. You have to say, here's what our values look like in action, and here is the opposite of what our values look like in action. And then you also have to enforce them. You have to be willing to make difficult decisions that you don't want to make in most cases based on your core values. Otherwise, your core values mean nothing. And these need to be established before we can start building operations and before we can start scaling the agency. And I'm sure that if you don't have core values, you can feel the everlasting struggle of operations always feeling messy and never being able to scale. Maybe there's a revenue number, a monthly revenue number that you always seem to be able to hit, and then you can't get past. It's like when I was growing my agency way back in the day, we always wanted to hit 100K per month. And for the first 3 years, we absolutely could not hit 100K per month. And then something shifted. And 1 month we hit 135K. And I was like, oh, this is the new norm. This is incredible. And then the next month we dropped down to like 90K per month. And I thought, what the hell? I thought that we were now doing 135K per month. But it's because we would hit these numbers, but we didn't have things in place. We didn't have the foundations. And then clients would churn. So your values are the blueprint for everything else. Operations are the build of it. And whether clients stick around or not is the lagging indicator of whether or not you have built everything together. If you want 3 actions that you can take this week to get you a little bit closer to what this end state looks like, first, write down the definition of done for your top 3 deliverables. It should be about 1 page each. You should have at least 1 QA checkpoint, and you should have 1 defined owner. Okay, that's step 1. Step 2 is identify your highest leverage role that needs clarity and publish 1 role scorecard for that person. What is their mission in 1 sentence? And this has to relate to the mission of the agency. What is their mission? What are 3 to 5 outcomes that you are going to be measuring them on? What is the outcome? How, like, what is the target? And then how often, whether it's weekly, monthly, maybe even daily, are you measuring them? And what behaviors do you need to see from this role? And then review this in your next one-on-one with that person. And then start giving them weekly feedback based on those outcomes. And then number 3 is, again, this is core values light. Just codify 3 core values as behaviors and then pick 1 enforcement moment this month and decide where you're going to make a decision based on these core values. You're not going to fix churn at the bottom. You actually have to fix culture at the top first. This is, again, in line with what I'm always harping on now, which is you have to be the CEO, not the operator. This is also exactly in line with how I work with agency founders to help build scalable agencies, to help build effective teams so that you can actually stop feeling so burnt out. Step out of the agency occasionally. Maybe take a vacation and know that people are actually going to handle things. And when you get back, I've had some people tell me, I came back from a vacation and we'd actually signed an additional client and there were no fires burning. And that is a fantastic feeling. As someone who spent over 6 years never going on vacation without my laptop and never dealing with either employee fires or client fires or just having to give people access to different platforms, it's a fantastic feeling when you can finally actually just go on vacation. So anyway, if that is of interest to you, you can always go to agencyuplift.co and book a meeting with me.